Hey, it's the podcast guy.
Sutton United Talk Time on podcast. It's the Sutton Podcast.
And there it is! Sutton United at the GM Vauxhall Conference have put out First Division Coventry City, winners of the FA Cup themselves less than 2 years ago. And what a moment to enjoy for the fans of this Surrey side. They've had their moments before, but never one like this.
But the whistle goes down. Delight for Sutton United. Sutton United, the National League, are through to the last 16 of the FA Cup. No longer English football's perennial non-league club. A 123-year crescendo reaches a new peak for Sutton United, who are promoted to the Football League for the first time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Sutton United Talk Time on podcast. Something a little bit different this episode. So instead of hearing from Sutton supporters panel and opposition, we're going to get some, in quote, outsiders. Both been very complimentary to us in the past, but joining me tonight is Nick Godwin. Hi, Nick. How are you? Godwin.
Hello,
I said it wrong again already. Yeah. Sorry.
Just the 1-0.
Yeah, I know. I've written it about 7 times in your email. Going, why is his email?
I didn't know we had any Leighton Orient fans on.
And Gabriel Sutton. Hi, Gab. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Very good to see you as always. Looking forward to chatting.
Good. So I've decided to set off this new year in style and show up not only my technical problems, but my lack of knowledge by inviting some people with some good knowledge on and some good broadcasting skills. So treat the people who actually listen and put up with me throughout the show for, it was 100 episodes last time out, so you're 101. Poor people who listen to this rubbish. Thank you so much for your time. I will sort of bomb through. Basically, I've got a few questions, and it's all about sort of how Sutton is perceived from outside the club. I know you've had some interaction with the fans, and as I said, you've been quite complimentary in the past, and that wasn't just the reason you were chosen. It does help, though. So, Nick, I know you kind of had knowledge of us prior to us coming into the Football League. But Gab, I'm not sure how much you did, but so to the two of you, really, what was your thoughts about Sutton when we got promoted into the league last season? If I start with you, Nick, I'll give Gab a minute or two to think about his answer.
I just remember it being the most astonishing story, really, because, you know, I'd been past the ground, to the ground, in the ground previously, and I was very aware that Sutton United were, in my own mind, as someone who kind of covers London football up and down the city, you know, a very well-run, very content non-league club. I think Paul Doswell might have actually used those words to me when I spoke to him around the FA Cup run. You know, there was all that business with the artificial surface as well, which would have meant that getting promoted would have meant getting rid of it, and it was such a vital community asset as well. So I remember thinking, back when they got promoted, I was there that day when they won the league, and I remember thinking back to that conversation that I had with Paul Doswell not that many years previously, where he just kind of articulated this really sound vision of Sutton as this very, very well plugged into its community, very well run, well supported non-league team who are very happy kind of getting on with their role in their community, and that was that. But then this, you know, this wave of success has just kind of propelled them. Even though all of those things were true then, and to a degree still are true, you know, this irresistible wave of success, and it almost made that achievement that day when I sat there in the press box thinking, I can't believe they've done it. And it will also be, from a journalistic point of view, fascinating to see how that really solid non-league football club manages to get on in the Football League for the first time ever.
Yeah, I mean, that day was, I maintain, was a very odd day because it was the first match we got to see properly for a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we were 1-0 up and we were doing all right. I've watched it back and we were fine, but there was just this nervousness throughout the ground and everyone was silent until Louis John. And I think you've had 2 or 3 of us on asking what our favourite goal is. And we said, yeah, Louis John's. It wasn't the most classic goal, but he just stuck out his big old long leg and scored. And at that point, we were like, Oh my God, we've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Sorry,
the
Gav.
third one as well, the Kenny Davis to Ollie Afe as well, that
Yeah.
kind of rounded it off. That was a
Yeah.
lovely pass from Kenny, I thought, as well.
It was beautiful, but it was only at that 2-0 that suddenly this noise went around going, hang on a minute, I think we've just done this.
I think I screamed "Start the party" in the commentary we were doing at that point, because I would agree. I thought 2-0, they're not coming back from this. That's sealed it. And everybody knows that it's done now. And the celebrations afterwards, all the players knew it. Matt Gray knew it. The fact there were 2,000 people in the ground, everybody knew it. So that really was the moment when the penny dropped.
Yeah, I think the phrase they used back in the FA Cup run. And I think 2 seasons after, when we almost got to the title, was we want to be the best non-league side we can be. And so, because Football League was never really on our agenda, wasn't really on our radar. But they always said, if we get it, we're taking it. We're not trying for it, but if it happens, it happens. But Gab, what were your impressions of Sutton before you knew we were promoted?
Well, I think, as you can imagine, it's a club I've learned a lot about over the last 2 years quite quickly, I suppose, because they weren't a club that I was massively sort of familiar with. Obviously, you're aware that Paul Doswell had been manager for a number of years. Was it 10 years, something along those lines? Yeah, 12, right?
Yeah.
He did some incredibly impressive work, because I think you won certainly step 3 under him, weren't you? And then a couple of promotions. So yeah, really impressive work under Paul Doswell. And I think that coming into it, I think you're always a little bit not sure quite what to expect, because it's a club that only actually turned full time on winning promotion to the Football League. And I think that over the last couple of years, the club's had to try and evolve very quickly, and it's been a learning process. And while the players have done incredibly well on the pitch, there's still a lot of adjustments to be made off it, but some good progress so far. But a huge fan of the work that Matt Gray's done, and hopefully you can continue to build.
Yeah, I think AB, the vice chairman, has basically said many times, the off-the-field team now need to catch up with the on-field team. And if they could just calm down for a little while, that would be wonderful. Which leads me nicely on to last season. I mean, there was mixed things, because as you say, there wasn't many people knowing who we were. There was mixed predictions. But what were your thoughts during last season, when I think we were in the top 7 for a good 3 or 4 months? I know, Gab, we had lots of fun with the whole 50 points. When we're on 48 points, we're still 50 points.
You were saying you wanted 50 points when you were on 51 points.
Yeah. Well, we'd be happy for some of the points to roll over to this season. But what were your thoughts last season when we seemed to be just doing so well? We just had this golden run. What were you thinking about team, and when did your sort of opinion kind of change of us?
For me, it's a great question, because I think that possibly in the early weeks of the season, was it 2 points from the first 5 games, and it was a sense that maybe you'd probably played a bit better than results had possibly suggested, and then it all seemed to click. But I suppose it's been difficult for me to really get a handle on Sutton United firsthand, because the 2 performances I saw last season were probably 2 of the worst performances of the season, because I was up at Rochdale, where, to be honest, you're awful, apart from a 10-minute spell. And then I also went to Port Vale, where wasn't the best performance, that one either. So I didn't quite get the chance to see really Sutton United at their best for sort of the 90 minutes, really. But a huge fan of the culture Matt Gray's created, and I actually did an interview with him for my own show called EFL Debate, and I asked him about how important the mentality and the attitude of the players that he brings in, and how important that is to the recruitment process, and he said it's the most important thing for him, because I think he's very protective of the culture that he's got in place there. Yeah, no,
it definitely is. Nick, I know you mentioned the dreaded second season syndrome to him, but apart from that, how did you find Matt as with opposed to other EFL managers?
Fantastic. He's a brilliant at he was very, very good and very accessible when you guys were in the National League. That day, he spoke to me a couple of hours before kickoff, just as a little pre-recorded interview. You know, you even at that level, you don't always get access to a manager, particularly if you're a radio station. You know, you don't get access to a manager a couple of hours before kickoff. That just doesn't happen. But he was good enough to speak to us and give us a sense of how he was feeling and what he told the players and all that kind of stuff. So he has been brilliant. I think he's kind of grown into it as well. I think he's taken. You know, there is a huge difference, and especially when you're a story like Sutton are, people taking it, oh, you know, Sutton United, this is very interesting, you know, they've come from nowhere and so on. But he has played all of that. This is purely from a media point of view. The rest of it, he's been fantastic at as well. Purely from a media point of view, I think he's played it so well. He's never kind of indulged in the sort of little old Sutton business, except to kind of weaponize it when it's appropriate. And I think that's entirely legitimate for him. And he always goes back to his principles as well. You know, he has a real sense of how this should be done, even at the level he's at now. There's no point have you ever felt that he's kind of out of his depth at all. He's just kind of grown into the job with every challenge that's come along. And, you know, I think that's been very impressive because, you know, the manager of a mid-table non-league side suddenly thrust into League Two, suddenly going to Wembley, that would frighten the life out of me. But as I said, he just takes it all in his stride, which is absolutely exceptional. And he's very, very good to deal with from a media perspective. He's very open, and as I said, it is so different in League Two. But from that perspective in particular, I think he's just flourished really.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of still feel it's still the start of a project, and then you see stats like he's something like the top 10 longest serving EFL managers. And it's like, how on earth can that be right? Because we still feel we're at the start of his story. But yeah, I think there's just so much that aligned for us. It was right club, right time, right board, right fans. I know I've apologised to you past Nick, where I said it's terrible when you get the Sutton fans on because you can take one out, put someone else in, and it's the same answer, same story, because we are all literally on the same page.
But that tells you something, doesn't it? You know, you can get we do some London clubs and they come on and some of them hate the manager, some of them love the manager, some of them think it's going in the right direction, other thinks that there's no identity and there lacks direction. And you know, we could all name the clubs involved. I'm sure Gab knows, you know, some of the London clubs in particular who I could be referring to. But you know, there is a unity of purpose. That's the phrase I would use with Sutton. And again, because you know, it's interesting you're saying there at the beginning, it does feel like Sutton are still, which is remarkable, on this kind of sort of jet-propelled roller coaster. And eventually, you know, that's when I sort of hinted at this second season syndrome thing at the start of the campaign with Matt, which did not go down well. That eventually, you know, the fuel in this rocket is going to run out, and there will be a plateauing or a stabilisation at some point. But every time I say this, I look like a right idiot, because every time I say this, it just doesn't happen. So, you know, it's confounded some of the knowledge on that front. But there is a very good reason why all Sutton fans say the same thing, is because they like what they're seeing at the moment. And the key thing is they all sort of say, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great. But we still feel it's our football club. We still feel it. We're connected to it in the way we were connected to it when we were in non-league. And we still feel that's the people running the club are going to insist that connection remains. Mm-hmm. And again, I hear that every time, which means, you know, there must be at least a grain of truth about it as well, which is very encouraging to hear.
Well,
I'd just like to pick up on Nick's point there about this sort of steam train thing where Sutton United have just had so much momentum and achieved so much in a short space of time, and I think it was a plateauing that sort of Nick described. I almost think that in a way Sutton United sort of need a bit of a plateauing up to a point, because I think speaking to Matt a couple of weeks ago. He was very honest when talking about last season, and if Sutton United had snuck into the playoffs and gone up, hand on heart for him, it would have been too soon. And I think that possibly the group of players that have got Sutton United to where they are possibly aren't necessarily going to be the exact same ones that are going to keep them in the EFL over the next few years and possibly beyond. Who knows? But I think that now it's got to be a very careful process for Matt, where it's a case of protecting this really strong culture in the squad, and but just very gradually evolving it and introducing a bit more quality where possible here and there. I think that's the process, and sometimes that's not necessarily going to be conducive to just shooting up again. Sometimes there does need to be a bit of a plateauing, but I think that's possibly a necessary step, if you like, for where the club is, certainly off the field.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone really thought if we snuck into the playoffs we were going to do anything in the playoffs, because we have a rubbish record at the playoffs. So we all know that. But to miss out by, I think, a record number of points, and all we needed on the last day was either of the teams both battling for the championship to win and us to win, and neither one of them managed to win. It's like, how is that possible? But I felt when I spoke to him, he's very motivating, and I was ready to give him like 20 minutes on the pitch, even though I can barely run. So he's a really, really nice guy. You say he's accessible. Both him and Bruce gave me time in the week of the Pizza Cup final. They literally did an interview for me, same as a BBC interview or anyone else. And I was like, oh my God, I really can't really take up your time. And they're like, yes, you can, Mike. You absolutely can take our time. But yeah, I just love them to bits. All of them. And the board, we were saying about the board, someone made a point when we played Leeds, one of the officers looked around the boardroom and said 7 or 8 of the people on the board at that time were at the Leeds match way back when Leeds beat us 6-0 sort of 40 odd years ago, and they were all supporters then and on the board then. So it's a definite progression from supporter to board for some, not for everyone, because I'd be rubbish at that.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to Sutton United Talk Time on podcast, the Sutton Podcast. If you are new to the show, hello, and you are very welcome. Hope you enjoy what we do. It's a very simple format. We get a few people on to talk about the game that's just gone, and then we preview the next game coming up. We are available on most podcast platforms where you can listen, rate and review. If you find that we're not on your preferred platform, please let me know and I'll sort that for you. If anyone would like to support the podcast, you can find out how with more information on the website, which is www.suttonpodcast.com, and there's a tab where you can find out how to be a guest as well. Please find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok with the username @SuttonPodcast. Every like, follow and share is really appreciated. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.
But this season, obviously, has been a struggle. From our point of view, yes, there were a lot of predictions, Gab, that we were going to struggle and finish in the lower half of the table. That did change, and I did ask you a question. What
I
changed?
did say 22nd before the season.
Yeah. So far on this season, what do you sort of? Are we right? The injuries are what's caused it, or is the second season syndrome what causes it? Nick, if I start with you on that one.
It seems to me it's a bit of both. The injury's been horrendous, and even Matt, who has just got this kind of indestructible self-confidence, has struck me on occasion hearing him just thinking, I cannot believe how bad the injury situation has become. I just don't understand the bad luck that we've had visited on us, and equally. It is tough that second season, I think, in any new division, because you are new and you are different, and people haven't worked you out, and people have probably underestimated you in the opening season you're in a new division. I think that's entirely possible for that to be the case. People have said, oh, there's Sutton there, they're a non-league team, they won't threaten us in any of the ways we think, and then of course they get horribly found out. Whereas this season people have been like, right, well, we know a little bit more of what's coming, and we're going to do our level best to stop it. It's not always possible to stop it, but at least we're going to be aware that these things, from a Sutton perspective, could hurt us. So you have lost a little bit of that element. But again, I don't know, I hope this doesn't sound too trite. Isn't that all about establishing yourself in League Two? Is that not part of the process in that division where you get promoted, you wow everybody because you're different, and then you have to roll your sleeves up and carve out a place for yourself in a new division, not by winning 5-10 games in a row, but by getting your players booted and injured and having to sort of go out with a second string and go and get a point somewhere or whatever it is. So it does strike me as this is just part of the natural process of Sutton establishing themselves in that division. You'd hope it doesn't get any worse, because that they haven't had the points in the bank, I think, at this point of the season that they had this time last season. But it hadn't surprised me. I wouldn't call it second season syndrome again because the manager said how much he objects to it. But yeah, I think it's all part of the natural, the slings and arrows of league football. Everybody wants to be in that division, and you got to fight hard to stay in it.
Yeah, I spoke to Terry Bullivant, who's obviously been around for a decade or two. And he said, I've never known the injuries like this where they're all long-term in similar positions. So we could have had the same number of injuries spread around a bit, but it was all centre-backs or centre midfields. And I think any team, if you take out your two of your three main central midfielders and two main three defenders, you're going to struggle. But Gab, I asked you what made you change your mind to partway through the season, and you said it's because of the injuries that made you change your position on where we were going to finish.
Yeah, I think the injuries were certainly a big factor behind the struggles at times in the first half of the season, and I think it was at times 10 players out at any one point. So obviously that makes things a lot more difficult for any club in this division, but especially for Sutton, where resources are tight. So really impressed actually with how the club has been able to kind of pull through, and I think a lot of that is down to the culture that Matt Gray has instilled or continued to instill off the back of Paul Doswell, just because there just seems to be this mentality where it's like we dig in, in times of adversity, just get the head down and get on with it, where clubs who don't have that sort of culture and ethos might struggle a lot more with the same kind of injury crisis. But I saw you win 1-0 at Wimbledon with Joe Kizzy at centre-back and Enzio Boldvine at right-back, and all of a sudden, about 10 weeks later, you've still got those two players in the same positions, and it just shows how you've been able to dig out points in adversity, really. And now you've got Aaron Pierre, Ben Goodliff, Ali Smith and Harry Beautyman back fit, along with possibly a few others. I think that's a real plus, and hopefully you can have a good second half of the season off the back of that.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a Gillingham fan, and we were shocked, just literally shocked, because one thing we've always been very, very lucky with, apart from 1 or 2 seasons in sort of early 2000s, is basically every Sutton team go out and they might get beaten, they might get badly beaten, but they try and they don't stop running, and they're beaten usually because of something that's quite skillful, or they're just not quite good enough. No point have we ever gone, they didn't give it all their all. You can literally see the players coming off just dripped in sweat. And yeah, I think every player who plays for us on a regular basis has a really good relationship with the crowd. On the back of our third shirt is the names of everyone who supported during COVID. And apparently the players love wearing it. And so the new kit suppliers were told, you have to replicate that kit exactly. There's no changes there. But do you see that with other clubs? Does Sutton seem different? Because obviously I'm very insular. I look at Sutton and that's it. Is it as odd as I think it is, and we're a strange bunch, or is that everywhere?
I think I'd certainly a strange bunch, obviously. I think there is a certain unique spirit about Sutton United that probably is different to a lot of the clubs that are maybe more established in the Football League, and I think a lot of it does come from the sort of non-league roots. The fact that only was it 10 years ago, or maybe a bit longer, the club was in the Step 3 and non-league. Was it the Isthmian? Sorry, Mike. Was it the
Isthmian League? Yeah, it was 12. Yeah, 12 years ago. So 2 years ago we won the National. Yeah. 5 years ago we won Conference South, and then 5 years before that we won the Ryman, as it was.
Yeah, so it's a club that's had its roots in non-league football, and I think because of that, even playing in the Football League, it still carries elements of that with it. That's my sort of impression of it. And even Matt Gray he hosts a club pub quiz night a couple of times a year. You probably wouldn't see Vincent Kompany doing that at Burnley, would you? So I think there is a bit of a unique spirit there, and I think having a bar open, and I think you don't see that at too many other professional clubs. And I do hope that whatever sort of journey Sutton United have over the next 10, 20 years and beyond, don't lose that sort of spirit, because that's what gets people to get on board with the Sutton United journey over other clubs in London, like an Arsenal, a Tottenham, or a Chelsea. And I think that's a real selling point for Sutton United. I think that's a big part of the success you've had.
You may have hit upon a point there with me saying that everyone loves the players and we love that they're trying, but if they're in the bar afterwards, you're not going to say to Kobe Rowe, "You played rubbish today, mate," because he's a giant. they're all absolutely massive blokes, but they're lovely. So Nick, what's your sort of views on?
Well, yeah, I think Sutton are quite unique in some respects because of the way they got out of non-league. Because so much of the National League now is about how many resources you've got or what Hollywood film stars you've got backing you. And that's kind of the way that or the other sort of element of that. There's clubs that have a massive pedigree in the Football League previously. The teams that have gone down, some have come back and gone back down again, but you're talking about names that we all know from the past that have been Oldham Athletic FA Cup semi-finalists when I was a kid. It's extraordinary to see them down there. So what Sutton have done really well is their own sort of unique way out of it, which is basically to stick to their principles and do it quote unquote the right way. So in that way, I think they are a little bit unique, to be honest with you, because they have, again, they've gone up without really changing their identity or having to kind of take on the mantle of being, a non-league moneybags or something like that, which is very much assuredly not what Sutton's all about. So, yeah, I think even though there are great stories elsewhere, that's the great thing about football. There are brilliant tales of bucking trends and being against the odds all the time. Even though that is definitely the case, I think Sutton's one of the more solid ones, to be honest with you, in recent years, because most of the rest of the game as we know it is dictated by how much money you've got.
Yeah, I think we coined the phrase quite early last season. We're bringing non-league to the Football League. There was another little thing where Bruce got very upset by one of the chants last year with Sutton's going up with a tenner in the bank.
Oh, he didn't like that, yeah.
He didn't like that because he wanted to know where this tenner was.
Yeah.
And what can you spend it on? But
keep it to yourself.
Yeah, the expectation. I like the way you guys are saying unique rather than strange bunch. I like that. I think I'll stick to that instead. It's far more polite. But I think we were told we need 2-3 seasons at this level to get everything kind of paid for. So all the improvements we had to do with the pitch and the away stand and the other stands that have to follow. So we kind of got to have Football League status for a couple of years. I think that's why people were hoping to get promoted last year, because that meant we're going to have at least 3 years because we get promoted and maybe get relegated. But I think if we start that, we can then potentially start seeing some money spent on the pitch, but we're going to have to just keep looking for the bargains and people who are desperate to prove themselves. Like, I know you're a big fan of Omar, Joe Kizzy.
Oh, I love Omar, but mate, yeah.
Yeah. But that's exactly what they do. That game against Newport, it was like, has anyone played centre-back before? And I think he said, I played there under nines. Off you go, son. You're playing there again. But yeah, that's just exactly what we're like. But how do we see the rest of this season? Because we've seemed to have turned our corner. We seem to have got a few players back. I did say if we get the good luck as we got bad luck in the last season, the first half of the season, we're going to have an amazing storming second half of the season. Somehow or other, we are 3 points off the playoffs. No one knows how or why. But how do you kind of see it going for the rest of the season? Do you see us maintaining or doing a late charge?
Right, what a great question. I don't know is the first answer, because I think the League Two playoff scramble this season is incredibly competitive. So anyone down from sort of whoever's in fourth place at the moment. Was it Mansfield at one point or Carlisle? So anyone from Carlisle down to 15th place Tranmere or even Grimsby in 16th, I think has an outside shot at the playoffs. So I think it's incredibly tough. So just 9 points going from 4th to 16th. So it just shows you that a good run of form and you can sort of transform your fortunes, really. And I think that's what we've seen with Sutton United. But I just think that it's so close to call. But I think that there's a lot of encouragement to be had from the fact that there is a you're closer to a fully fit squad now with some of the returnees that are back. I think Ben Goodliff's going to make a huge difference, Ali Smith potentially as well. So, and I think with the spirit and feel-good factor around the place, possibly. If you ask me to sort of put money on it, I would say Sutton might just fall short, but definitely a lot better than 22nd.
And Nick, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get any worse, is it? Because of the players that have come back. So I suppose again, it's just whenever I make any prediction, because I suppose I've constantly sort of said, well done to Sutton. You've broken through yet another barrier that the club really weren't envisaging breaking through. As I said, getting to Wembley, challenging in League Two. These were all amazing things, and therefore I'd have probably said, look, a bit of mid-table obscurity. I don't know whether fans get kind of success fatigue almost, or not success fatigue, but just kind of drama fatigue when you go for years and years where you're either fighting relegation or you're challenging for something, and there's just kind of this urge to kind of disappear in mid-table. I don't know really, but I whenever I make any predictions about what Sutton are going to do, they absolutely buck the trend and prove me wrong. So I'm very reluctant to put too many trenchant opinions down. But I would have said they'll definitely be okay. Given what I've seen and heard, and again with the right, you wouldn't put it past Matt Gray to just get that kind of with the players back. I think I've just seen that David Ajiboye's come back as well. So just to a degree, getting the band back together again, and just that group doesn't really understand failure. It seems to me, and I know that's football gravity eventually catches up with every football team because it's just the way it works. But they've done so well by purely not accepting that this is their level. And because they must have been told this over and over again. They must have been told you'll be top of you're top of the National League now, but you'll fade, and these other well-resourced teams will overtake you, and that was wrong. Then they were probably told you'll definitely struggle in League Two. You'll be lucky to survive. They thrived, so again they're like, well, we're not going to pay attention to that. This season told second season syndrome. You'll bounce around the bottom six all season. Again, that hasn't happened. So it's very difficult to see how this group, with the players back and Ajiboye and all that kind of stuff, can have their horizons limited, I suppose. So therefore, if they can keep the players fit and the second half of the season is a real success, again, you wouldn't, they do know what it's like to chase down a playoff spot. It's not as though this is new to them anymore, because they did it and they very nearly got there last season. So from that point of view, there's good reasons to think it might even be possible.
I'd quite like to stick to the every 5 years. I can just about cope with that. That's all right. So we've got a few more years yet. Of all the players mentioned, we didn't mention the captain, leader, legend, Eastie. He joined us after bouncing around. The story goes he was about to walk away from football. Joined us, won the National League. On the National League South. Then a few years later, won the National League, and now everyone's kind of like, oh, he's in his 30s now, he's all right. Didn't realise how early his 30s were, because we only looked it up the other week. He's only 32. What's that all about? And this season, he has done so well. He's been amazing.
He said to me, we did an interview with him in the summer, and he said, my motivation was to have another crack at Football League. I want to be a Football League footballer again. Mm-hmm. And you could just see the determination in his eyes, just saying that was the task I set myself. Mm-hmm. When I got to Sutton, and I wanted that to be part of my career. I didn't want to think that part of my career is finished. And it was very striking. But clearly now he is living what he wanted to live, and why not? He absolutely appears determined to make the most of this, even though he might be sort of coming towards the end, perhaps, but not very close. But yeah, highly motivated. Yeah, well, exactly. There's nothing wrong being 42. I'm still harbouring vague hopes of success as a footballer at the age of 42. But eventually it's gonna get through to me. But yeah, he just looks like someone who's loving every minute of it, and it's a job achieved. But why stop doing what you wanted to do for years and have spent a decade working on?
And again, that's another story for Sutton as well. Craig Dundas, who has been with us for decades, came on last year and made his Football League debut.
Brilliant.
That's just insane, absolutely insane. I will wrap up other than just say the Wembley experience was insane, amazing. Most people, or quite a few people, were saying it's the Wigan match was the highlight, though, where we actually got to Wembley, not being at Wembley, because it was just actually a terrible experience, just like that. And I was standing, because I paid the most money I've ever had for a seat at Sutton United, and stood the whole game. And as it was coming towards the end, those last few seconds, I realised that if that final whistle went, there were going to be tears flowing. I wouldn't really stop it. And I was wearing a bright yellow jacket, standing behind the goal. And I was like, the cameras are going to pan to me, the fat man in the jacket, crying his eyes out. And then they scored, and I went, no, go back. I'll take it instead. But again, it would have been too easy to win that. It's a better story to come runners up and get the almost me. But thank you guys for your time. It's been a pleasure. I've kept you a little tiny minute longer than I said I would, Nick.
Okay. No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
Take care and see you soon. Thank you. Thanks.
Nice to see you, Gab. All the best.
Cheers.
Thank you.
United!